Hey folks, welcome to another Anthology review. Yes, I need some catching up on some of the games I've got, and for the most part, this is going to be a very expansion-heavy list, as the anthologies will probably focus on. However, there's one or two, well, one of them's debatable as to whether you call it an expansion, another one is just a game in its own right that will take no time to talk about. So you know what? Why don't we start with it? The one game that isn't an expansion. Just one. This is a straight up simple party game. It won the Spiel des Jahres this year, and naturally that means that it's going to sell lots of copies and everybody's going to be thinking, oh, I need to grab a copy of this because it's won the Spiel des Jahres, which instantly gives a game good selling potential. Of course, that does not mean that the Spiel des Jahres simply means, oh, it's a great game. You know, if you look back through the years, I can think of a few where the Spiel des Jahres is less than desirable, and the same goes for the Kennerspiel as well. But it certainly bears looking at. So Just One is a very simple party game. I mean, all you're literally doing in here is it's a co-op, and you have a bunch of clue cards. You'll take about 13 at random, each have 5 on there. You take one out, face it away from one player, and they pick a random number. That's the clue word. You've got to get them to guess. Each other player on a dry erase easel board basically writes down a clue word, subject to some restrictions, but that will help the other player guess that word. One snag. They can't confer with the other members of the team, and if they put down a word that is too similar or exactly the same as somebody else's, then they both get wiped. And so the person guessing the clue will have limited words available if you think too much like the other players. It's a bit like Scattergrees if you made it into a co-op. Because with Scattergrees you had to come up with different answers to everybody else. Well, it's that same mentality, except you're doing it in a co-op fashion, although even though you're working together, you're still trying not to think like each other. It's a kind of a weird concept to get through. But, you know, it's a very simple one. You just basically reveal all the clue words, that person then looks at them all and goes, oh god, tries to guess what the word is, and if you get it right, goes on a pile, if you don't, goes on a different pile, and you basically just try and get as many out of the 13 as possible. Straight up, that is it. Dirt simple. So why is it Spiel des Jahres worthy? Because it's genuinely good fun. It's very simple. Co-op means that people can get into it and not feel like they're letting the team down, you know, or, oh, I'm not doing very well here. It's like, well, we're all working together. We're all trying to help you out. So there's none of that kind of bad feeling or bad blood like even another party game that's competitive might give you. With this one, the components are solid. I mean, you've got a lot of dry erase pens, different colours, the easel boards are fine. You know, you've got rubbers on the back of the pen so you can rub the things out. The cards are decent stock. I mean, it's minimal components at the end of the day, but they've at least kitted you out with everything that you can need and will need in order to play it. Goes from 3 to 7 players. If you had some alternative means of writing and rubbing out stuff, there's no reason you couldn't go to more players than 7, though I don't quite recommend it because there's one aspect of the player scaling, which is that the less players you have, the less clue words you'll have overall, and probably the less often you're going to think of the same word as someone else. With more players though, you get more chance of clues being wiped out, even though there's more players giving clues. But that's fun. This is definitely not a game I'd want to play with 3 or 4 ideally. I'm thinking 5 minimum and ideally 6 or 7. Go to the full player count with this. You want to have that that sort of fun but frustrating element of, right, okay, so we got to guess clock. Well, I could put time, but you're going to put time, aren't you? I just know it. One of you was putting time. I could put hand. No, maybe that's too obscure. Because you can only think of one word. And so it's that great thought process of, I know this word is great, but someone else is going to put it. But they might not. Everybody else might cower out of it. They might have already thought of the word and thought, yeah, but somebody else will put that. And then nobody puts it. But then maybe one person decides, you know what, I'll take the full, I'll put it down. And they either get away with it or they've matched a match with someone else and they're white. And I must admit, it is hilarious when you get those rare but occasional circumstances where everybody matches with someone else and the person's like, right, okay, and go. And there's nothing. There's literally nothing. So you just go on, guess. It's easy. We didn't even have to give you any clues. It was that simple. bagel. You know, it's like, what could you guess with no clue words? It does create some good fun moments, but it's a very quick game. We're talking 20 to 30 minutes tops. It's got drop-in, drop-out capability because frankly, there's no reason why people can just drop in at the last minute. What does it matter? You know, you're not caring too much about trying to get a high score. You're just having a laugh. So if you start off with 7 and then 2 have to leave, then fine, you just carry on with 5. If you like started quickly because there was only 5 of you and then 1 or 2 people turn up to the 9, it's like, oh, can we join in? And it's like, yeah, we still got 7 cards left, just join in, we'll tell you how it works, and then we'll just continue on. Nice and simple, accessible to just about everybody on the planet. So it's a solid game. I don't think it's quite as laugh out loud funny though as some other party games. I think some party games do that aspect a lot better. And definitely, as much as the clue cards are fairly varied, there's definitely an aspect of some are a lot easier than others. I mean, we've come across some where I'm just like, how on earth would you ever get someone to guess that? But, you know, there's a few and far between, and it just adds to the cool sort of difficulty spikes every now and again. But, yeah, solid components, solid look, solid game all round. It deserves a high 7. It's one that you should definitely check out if you're a party game fan. It's cheap as chips to acquire, but what, like £15 or something, and it will sit nicely in my collection and introduce for new gamers all the time. I mean, it is gateway level, double gateway level. I mean, I don't know how much more gateway you can get. It's that simple, solid. I'm glad it won the Spiel des Jahres. I think out of the people that were going up against it, I think this was a clear winner. So, well done for just one. Okay, right, we're on to... Well, actually, let's do the first... Is it technically an expansion? It's technically more of the same, but this is technically 2 games I'm looking at here. This is the House of Riddles and the Haunted Roller Coaster. These are 2 new Exit games. Cosmos has provided these for me. And if you know anything about the Exit game series, you already know what these are. They're escape room type games. They're destructible. They cost about £10 to £12 a piece. You go for it once, you chuck it away. You know, like literally as soon as this review is done, this is going whoop, it's straight into the bin. Yeah, how about that, Rodney Smith, eh? But this is going straight in the bin, and I have no use for the box. So what's different about these? Well, not a lot. I mean, if you know what they are, you've already played this sort of stuff a million times. However, two major things I want to say about this. One of them is good, depending on your perspective. Another one I think is bad in general. Both of these have a difficulty rating of 2. It says on the back on the front, how close it is from novice to expert. Both of these are rated a 2. And that's basically very close to novice. In fact, there isn't even a single one of these titles that's currently a 1. However, the Haunted Roller Coaster I would probably allow as a 2. I mean, it's not that difficult, but there are 1 or 2 little hitch-ups. The House of Riddles, though, is a straight-up 1. This is hands down the easiest of the Exit games I have ever played. So much so that it was maximum marks without barely even trying. You know, and this is just me by myself, no one else solo, when I'm already tired from work, and I still managed to get maximum marks in this. It really is not that difficult a game. Now, it's a bit fiddly though in this particular case because there's 1 or 2 puzzles that have you like folding things all over the shop, and it's not overly clear which way it intends for you to do something. So, you know, you might end up in a bit of a struggle just by sheer dumb luck. Whereas if you get it right the first time, it's like, oh yeah, this makes sense. It's not overly clear sometimes. But once you get the puzzle sorted, it's like, oh yeah, that's pretty straightforward. The other one is more of a 2 difficulty, the Haunted Roller Coaster, and, you know, that's kind of a bit like the Sunken Treasure one, or was it called Sunken? I think it's just called Sunken Treasure, but it's about on par with that in difficulty. Now, that's a good thing on perspective. I've played a fair few of these now. I kind of want more difficult ones, so I don't tend to want to play the easy ones all the time, unless I'm like, you know what, I'm a little bit tired, but I feel like an escape room, I can at least whip out one of these. But if you want to introduce somebody to the Exit games in general, most of the time people go back to the old, the Ancient Lab or the Secret Lab. They think, oh yeah, that's the first one, we should get that. Wrong. Base it on the difficulty. And certainly these 2, particularly this one, I think this is actually the new one you should introduce to everybody who wants to get into this series first. It's the easiest of the lot. It's pretty clear for the most part, and so they can play this and go, well, that was cool, but I didn't find the puzzles that challenging. Give them the Orient Express and then watch them cry. But, you know, there's certainly more challenging ones out there, but this is a good way to get them into it. There is a problem with both of them though. And this is kind of something I've noticed with the easier ones in general. I think the only way to solve this problem is to up the difficulty. They're very linear, like super linear. You know, the Secret Lab was semi-linear, but you know, it had some leeway in it. But this one, the Sunken Treasure and the Haunted Roller Coaster, are straight up linear. Like, it is literally point A to point B, solve a puzzle. Point B to point C, solve a puzzle. Point C to point D, solve a puzzle. There is no like situation where you might have 2 to 3 puzzles on the go and you're not entirely certain whether a clue is supposed to go with this or a piece is meant to go with that one. There's none of that. It is straight up on rails. With this one, definitely it's like, it tries to give a little story, a little perspective as to what you're doing. Who cares? I mean, it's every generic story you've ever heard. You're there to solve riddles, and the riddles are entertaining even if they are a little bit straightforward. So, all in all, it's a solid 7 for these as well, or maybe, I suppose it depends. If you want this as a solid introduction to the series, it's a good 7. You know, it will do the job, it will introduce them to a nice, easy sort of starting point, and then you can move on to challenging ones later. But if you're someone who's played a lot of the exit games, and you're pretty good at this whole escape room thing, and you're like, I want something a bit more challenging, then these two probably aren't for you because they're going to be too simplistic. This is definitely a new player entry level side of the game. Like I say, if you've played these, you know already what to expect. I'm just telling you that they're pretty linear, and in this case, particularly, very easy. Okie dokie, next up, let's try this one. Yokai for Kanagawa, or Kanagawa, I'm not entirely certain the full pronunciation of it, but this one is a long-awaited expansion to the Kanagawa series. Because, well, I say long-awaited. The game's a solid one. It's a draft sort of tableau building game where you push your luck and draft these cards with pretty pictures on them and either build them into your art canvas or your studio. The studio gives you more paints to work with in order to paint more pictures and some special abilities, whereas painting the canvas gets you victory points based on weather symbols and what's pictured in there. Do you have anything in a row? Do you have free flowers, free trees, free animals, whatever. It's a very simple, light, zen-like game, and it's entertaining. I gave it a 7. I'd still give it about a 7 now. It's entertaining. But it's been long without an expansion, and here we are. Now, it's fairly cheap to acquire, it's not that expensive, but I was kind of hoping a bit more from the expansion, because I thought, oh yeah, we could have like a couple of brand new mechanics, make it a bit more gamer-like, and add even more variety. Well, it adds variety, but only a little bit. Essentially, you get 3 new colours. I think, trying to remember, one is lanterns, one is kites, and the other one is, I forget what it is. Lanterns, and umbrellas. And basically these score in slightly different ways to the other ones, and you cherry pick a couple from this and a couple from the old one, and you mix them to make the deck. So yeah, you will have some of the suits not in every game. So it does add a little bit of replay value, a bit more variety, but not drastically different. You know, it's not like you're gonna go, oh, the lanterns are here, right, I better play completely differently to how I normally do. Nah, it's just a different way of scoring. So it's nice, but kind of would have liked a little bit more. The main sort of different tweak here are yokai statues. There's these little brown miniatures, they look quite cool. They represent little statues, like the spirits, effectively. We're going into a bit more spiritualistic than we need to, I guess, with this. And they are negative points at the end of the game, and some of the new cards will force you to take those statues. If you're fortunate enough to get all 3, though, you'll get some bonus points for a diploma, and it negates the negatives. But if you don't get that diploma, or you only have like 1 or 2 of them in front of you, it's negative points and it will count against your score. But some of the cards will tell you you have to take one, some will let you give them to other players, and if there's none available, then you might have to take someone else's. You know, there's just some very basic rules as to how these statues will move around from player to player, and essentially that's all they do as well. They're just some negative points and something from a card that tells you to do that. Nothing particularly mind-boggling or different here, and that's a good and a bad side to this expansion. There is no reason you couldn't teach this with the base game. It is that simple. So easy to just throw them in there, find 4 sets, teach the game with those 4 sets, or however many sets it is, and the statues. Easy. Very easy, auto-include in every single game. but at the same time, I was kind of hoping that it would give me a little bit more than just simply a little bit of extra variety. I mean, I know sometimes with some games I say just give me more cards, but they're generally the heavy games, the ones that already have a lot of mechanics. Kanagawa doesn't have a lot of mechanics, you know, it's a pretty simple game, and I suppose it's a good thing that they have retained that simplicity. But again, for paying for an expansion, you know, I mean, I say it's cheap, but it's not the cheapest thing in the world. I mean, board games are expensive in general. You're paying for the box. You will not need this box when you're done. It will just go into the base set. And I was just kind of maybe expecting a bit more meat to it. This one is literally more of the same and a tiny little mechanic bolted on. Not to say it's bad. I don't think this is a bad expansion at all, but it is in no way essential. If Kanagawa is one of those ones you just pull off from time to time, you could probably get off without buying this. But if it's a regular play for you, and you really do want that little bit of extra variety in, you know, what sets you play each game, then by all means grab this. It's not going to break your budget. It does the job very nicely. Yokai, probably about, I don't know, I'd give it a 6 overall. It does what it pretty much says on the box. I was just maybe expecting a bit more. Let's go with this one. This is quite a big expansion, Seasons of Inish. I like Inish. It's a solid game. You know, it's a hard sell. You know, many people I know aren't as willing to play it as I am, but you know, when I do get it to the table, I have a blast with it. Inish is an area control game where you're not Viking, but you're Irish clans, and you're controlling these different areas that give you bonus cards. You're drafting cards that give you the actions to do your turn, but you're all racing to one of 3 victory conditions. And it's very much like chess, where you check a king. This one you're sort of going, I've met the victory condition, therefore I'm going to win next turn unless you stop me now. And then everybody piles on you. It's a really cool game, looks great, you know, love it. This is a long-awaited expansion. We definitely wanted an expansion to add more stuff, but I was kind of worried it was going to overcomplicate the game because it's not a simple game already. And many people will play it, not understand what they're doing, and then not play it again because they didn't understand what they were doing. But I beg you, honestly, give it another chance. It's solid. But this one is a modular expansion. Firstly, it adds a 5th player. Do not care. I mean, you can shorten the game, I'll get onto that in a minute, but really I could not have cared less if this was still a 4-player game. I don't have much desire to play this with 5, but the second module is we need a king. And this is a small addition which I'll throw into every game that is 4 or 5 players now. It is in fact recommended in the rulebook to use it with 4 or 5 players, but you can use it with less if you really, really want. And it essentially shortens the game by adding an extra caveat to the victory conditions, in the sense that when somebody meets it, you can sometimes end up in that back and forth stalemate fashion where it's like, I'm going to win, no I'm not, I'm going to win, no I'm not, I'm going to win, no I'm not, and you know, that might go on for ages and suddenly it overstays its welcome. With this module though, it basically puts a timer on when somebody gets to that point, so that if they don't win outright, there's another way to determine a victor, and you should be able to avoid most tiebreaker issues. So it shortens it nicely when it's 4 or 5 players because you don't end up with that stalemate dragging on sensation. This is an auto-include in 4 and 5 players. Honestly, put it in if you can. The other modules, you can kind of chop and, well, one of them is just more epic tale cards. You know, those red cards, I wanted more of them, great. Put them in the game, you won't bat an eyelid. But some of them do require one of the other modules to use. The 2 that you can kind of chop and change to your heart's content, one I tend to use quite often, the other one I'm a bit more ho-hum. Firstly, islands. You now have these tiles and harbour pieces which allow you to basically, as you're creating the map, have these ones kind of off-centre that are islands by themselves. You have to use a harbour tile in order to get to them. You can control them, they can give you a special power, they might contribute to a victory condition, but they change a few rules in terms of setup, and there's 1 or 2 restrictions onto how you can place these tiles, but it basically gives the map a little bit more of a thematic edge. You know, not just showing that it's, you know, I mean, it's called Inish. The name, as far as I think, stands for island. So why not actually have some islands? It kind of makes sense. So it can create some interesting looking maps, you know, and it's up to you whether you use it. But if you do, you have to bear in mind some of the epic tale cards relate to islands specifically. So whether you use it or not, you have to make certain you extract the cards as necessary. But it's a pretty easy include. It's probably the most complex one from teaching perspective. But once you get it down, pretty straightforward. You just throw them in and it makes the map a little bit more interesting. The final module is the seasons, funny enough, the seasons, and this is the one which I will use half of the time. It essentially has a season counter, autumn, winter, summer and all that. And what happens is you rotate it as you go through the rounds, and a different effect happens as you're in each season. Like in the summer, it's easier to move around, but you get less of something else. In the winter, then cards are a bit more harder to play. You know, I forget what the exact abilities are, but essentially autumn and spring are fairly generic. You know, they got slight differences, but they're mainly generic. And then summer and winter imposes like a benefit and a restriction on everybody in the game. So it's just basically a global effect counter. You know, more predictable than an event deck, because at least with an event deck, it's just draw a card and see what happens. With this one, you know what season is coming, so you know that next season, like, movement's going to be really good. Well, okay, maybe I'll set up for that then and recruit this round, so that next round I can start moving them all over the map tiles. It's an extra complication, though, that you have to remember, oh yeah, hang on a minute, we're in summer, so we've got to apply this rule now, and it can make the game a little bit more fiddly, and certainly I don't think you should teach that to a new player. I think you should leave it out on new games. So I tend to leave it 50% in, 50% not, but it's a solid module. And overall, this is a great expansion. You know, the 5th player don't really care about, but it works with the second module that shortens 4 and 5 player games, which is a godsend of it in its own right and an auto include. The islands are cool, more epic tale cards are fine, and the seasons themselves, you know, are a nice addition for those who are comfortable with the game and have played it enough. Not the cheapest expansion though, I will admit. I forget how much it costs, but it's pretty expensive for what you get in here. A lot of that has gone to an oversized box to hold those cool landscape tiles and also the really cool artwork across the board. But it's a decent expansion. It's breathed some new life into one of my favorite games, Inish. You know, some of the stuff you can teach right off the bat, but hopefully with especially that second module to shorten the time, it can create maybe like some really cool area control games where you're not overstepping the mark. So Seasons of Inish from Madigo, cool expansion. Next up is an expansion you've probably been waiting for on this whole list, and that is Teotihuacan. Is that the right pronunciation? I don't know.
We have to wait for Vegeta and Trunks to come out of the hypertonic lion tamer.
That one was on purpose.
Could have been.
The late pre-classic period expansion. Stupid diagline, stupid name. Late pre-classic period, what does that even mean? You know, whatever this game includes makes no difference to late pre-classic. Seriously, name your game something more interesting, guys. Just call it expansion if you can't come up with a decent name. But this one, oh yeah, this one's been hyped, you know. I mean, Teotihuacan is a fantastic Euro game. It was in my top 100, just missed the top half, spoiler alert, but, you know, definitely one that I enjoy playing. So, with the concept of an expansion come out a little bit too soon after the base game, I must admit. I mean, you know, the base game was only released late last year, so it's like, how long has this been on your NARS? You know, did you forget to include it before and chop bits out? I don't know. But it's a expansion that everyone's been waiting for. Doesn't add another 5th player, thank God. I mean, the amount of expansions that add 5th players for no good reason, it's nice to see that this one doesn't do it. So well done you. You get a point for that already. But this one is a modular expansion and adds several new elements. Firstly, you've got player powers. These are ridiculously strong player powers, although balanced is yet to be desired. Generally what these are is that you'll get shuffled a couple of them at the start and you'll pick one in actual player power, all well and good. For the most part, they will give you a substantial benefit, but also a negative. And what this may do is that it may steer you onto a particular victory path. Like, let's see, I'm very good at getting coffee on a regular basis. Well, then I could go for that strategy instead. Or one of them might say, well, you suck at building because you've got to pay extra wood for it. But you can get up the temple tracks quicker. Okay, maybe my focus on this game should be temple tracks. That's all well and good. However, we've definitely come across 1 or 2 powers in this game that we don't think are particularly well balanced. You know, not necessarily that they're too powerful. I haven't come across any that I think are stupidly powerful that they're just auto wins. But I've definitely seen 1 or 2 where they just don't seem worth the cap, really. I mean, the last time I played this, I used a power that... What was it? Christ, I can't remember. It was something about leveling. Oh yeah, it meant I never had to pay the cocoa cost I got 1 less cocoa when I used that as a cocoa action, but I never paid cocoa to unlock my workers. Dang, that was good. I basically spent the entire game never doing a single main action other than technologies. Everything else was just putting dice into the temple spaces and doing both of those abilities because of one module allowing me to do it really cheaply. I'll get onto that in a minute. But, whew, that was a fun power. But then a friend of mine had a power that said he had to pay an extra wood for every one of the building actions, and his plus side was not that great. It was a little bit lackluster to say the least. So, one issue is that some of these powers I don't think are going to be very desirable than others. Now, of course, you get 2 to pick from, so you'll be able to avoid that one if you don't think it's particularly good. But there's not that many powers in here, and certainly I feel that some are easier to use or some are better than others. But it's not a big deal. I mean, you can throw them in if you like. I throw them in all the time, and people just avoid the powers that they don't think are as good. You know, because I don't think there's a power in here yet that anyone has gone, oh my god, that's auto win, it's like too powerful. But, you know, there's going to be people on BGG debating this until the cows come home. So it's going to, you know, you're going to get debates all over the shop. But player powers, always a good thing. The next module is an orange temple. So you've got 3 temples before, now you got a 4th. This temple works a bit differently though. You get a replacement nobles board, the number 6 board, in order to level up on that temple, and some rules to dictate how you level up. But basically it works just like another temple. But the bonuses you get are a bit different. Yes, you can get to the very top and get one of those tiles, but what happens en route is that aside from the occasional moving backwards of dice, which is different, it allows you to get these special abilities throughout the rest of the game. Level 1, 2, and 3 abilities, and you pick one, you put your disc on it, and you have that for the rest of the game. So this is not a temple that's particularly good for getting points, cocoa, or resources, but the abilities are pretty sweet. You remember that power I said I used a minute ago about never having to pay cocoa to unlock my workers, so I just unlocked them at will? Well, I leveled up on the orange track first really quickly, because the first power, one of the first powers I grabbed, was I don't have to pay a cocoa to do both of those temple actions. So I unlock for free, and I can put my die into one of those temple spaces, not only getting a temple increase, but also the tile, which you have to pay cocoa and wood for, but again, I knew that going in, and I don't have to pay the extra cocoa, or pay to unlock them. Oh boy, that's why I did it for the whole game, and it was a very cool path to victory, and I ended up winning the game as a result. It looked like I was in 4th place for most of the game, but because my endgame scoring was so huge, I basically overlapped everybody. So it worked really well. But these abilities are quite cool. They unlock new paths to victory if you aim for them specifically. There's scoring opportunities in the later abilities, but the early ones are like, that helps my strategy. I might want to aim for that first. It's another temple track, pretty easy to include. You could just ignore it entirely if temples aren't your thing. You know, it's a cool one. I like these temples. It'd be cool to see a 5th one maybe, you know, maybe I could interchange, although would the board allow you to replace one of the original 3 temples? I don't know. Would that upset the balance? Hard to say, but that'd be an idea for a future expansion. Trying to recall. Oh yes, the season tiles. Again, like with the, you know, with other games where it's like, oh yeah, every season you get a special ability, a global event, that kind of thing. Well, this is the same. You shuffle a bunch of tiles, you put 3 of them out on this board that's been specially designed for this expansion, and you flip one up on each, I believe it's epoch, and in each epoch, that ability is for everybody. Like, for example, you get an extra 2 points if you build a noble house. Something costs less cocoa for the round. You have the opportunity to spend extra cocoa to do more temple leveling, that kind of thing. There's even a blank one in there, which you can shuffle in just because occasionally the epoch may play out as normal. Easy include, easy to tell what the effects are. They're an auto-include in every game. It just ups the variety of what sort of stuff could affect the game, because you might have a tile that gives you the extra points for noble houses, and it's like, well, I wasn't aiming for that this game, but you know, now's the time to build a few of those, so maybe why not? Yeah, it unlocks those little tactical openings for you, and it's pretty solid. And like I say, dirt easy to include. After that, you have a replacement number 7 and number 8 board. The number 7 and 8 board are basically the decoration board and the temple building board. Well, For the most part, I like these boards, because what they do is that they effectively give the 7 and 8 action a tier system, much like the resource gathering ones, which is great. It keeps everything on a similar level, and the tier system is easy enough to follow, and pretty, cool in the way that it uses multiple dice, and depending on what the value of the dice is, you get to do certain, building and that. But other than that, the whole idea of, build temple in this layer and match the symbols and that's unchanged. But there's a bit of a debate going on BGG, and I don't know where I stand, because there's an expert variant scoring mechanism in this, where you restrict how many points the temple tiles give you, the number 8 action. It is reported by a fair few people online that if you don't use this variant, the temple now becomes too overpowered as a strategy to focus on the 8 board. And certainly the 7 board is still pretty powerful when you combine it with the technology that gets you victory points anyway. But I've used it with and without the expert variant scoring, and it's hard to tell if they're right or not. Because I beat somebody when I was using the expert variant scoring, using that weird temple strategy I mentioned earlier. When I didn't put the expert variant scoring in, I noticed that the person who focused on that did pretty well and nearly won, but didn't quite. But they were close. I mean, it was barely a few points in it. But certainly it wasn't too difficult for them, with the help of 1 or 2 technologies, to really munchkin the number 8 spot. So it's hard to tell. The expert variant scoring is meant to allow other strategies to come to fruition, but it doesn't nerf the number 8 spot to the point where you would never do it. You can still do that spot pretty well, but it's not giving you a ton of points just because you happen to build on the next level up. So I personally would like to use the variant more often than not, but I kind of don't mind either way. But this is a debate that hasn't really been answered online. I'm just going to say as a warning going in that you might want to tweak the game to your heart's content with that expert variant scoring and see how you get on. If you don't notice a problem, then fine, don't use it. But if you find that number 8 action just becomes a bit too good with these replacement tiles, then just throw in the expert variant scoring and it should solve the problem. So, it's a small niggle, but you may have to do a little bit of balance tweaking of your own accord to make up for the temple. And that's pretty much the deal. I mean, it's a solid expansion, it's modular. If you know how to play the game, you can easily throw in every module from this without a second thought. And to be honest, even when teaching the game, I would throw in some of these. I mean, the player powers can guide new players onto particular victory paths. All well and good. The the season effects, the epoch effects, big deal. It's not much to teach. You just reveal it and say that's going on, end of story. Throw them in every game. You probably may not want to throw in the orange temple with new players, but I would probably throw in the 7 and 8 board replacement with new players as well, because I just think those boards are easier to understand than the previous ones, because they follow the same tier system as the stone and gold and wood gathering boards. So when you teach them how those boards work, the 7 and 8 board becomes a lot easier to manage. So honestly, other than the orange temple, I would throw all the modules in this box in every single game I teach. If you think that they're heavy-duty gamers and they'll get this game without too much of a trouble, then just throw in the orange temple as well. I've done it. It's worked fine for me. Not so much on occasional times. It really does depend on the players you have. So, all in all, really like this expansion. It's great. It's solid. Not too expensive for what it is. I mean, you're getting quite a bit of, extra heavy-duty content tiles in that. I mean, more boards, more tiles, thick, same component quality as before. It's a dumb name, but at least everything fits in this box, so I no longer need this box anymore, so I can just chuck the box all over these other boxes here in some higgledy-piggledy fashion. I don't care. Box isn't needed. There's still plenty of space in the base box for maybe a small expansion on top, but any more than that, and they might have to consider alternative means. But by that point, I think we'll be getting some giant big box anyway, and that's assuming this game even gets another expansion. I mean, will it? Who knows? We'll have to ask Danielle Tassini about that one. So, Teotihuacan, late pre-classic, Who Gives a Monkeys? Solid expansion for a solid game. And finally, here we go. Baron Park. Yes, this is one of my favorite games. It's high in my top 100, as you've seen. The Bad News Bears. Stupid tagline, stupid name. All right. I mean, I think this just comes from the German translation that they use. But seriously, what does the Bad News Bears even mean? It doesn't make sense. You literally could have just called this Baron Park expansion, and it would have made as much difference. Now, you can hear there's content in this. We'll get onto that a bit later. But essentially, this adds 2 major modules to the game. There's a small module of more objective tiles, that's all well and good. But the 2 main things it adds, firstly, grizzly bear tiles. They're these huge things with weird shapes, you know, like crazy designs. Like one actually loops all the way back in on itself, so you could put it around a bear statue tile. You know, some really cool stuff. But what this is these are high point scoring tiles where on your turn, if you have 1 bear tile and 1 green tile, you can cash them in, chuck them out of the game, and take a grizzly tile of your choice and place it immediately. Great for covering up a lot of space in one go, especially if in the late game you've got some tiles that aren't worth many points, and it's like, well, I could give up this 1 point polar bear tile and get myself a 10 point grizzly bear tile. Of course, the later you leave it, the less space you've got to work around. Whereas if you do it early in the game, you're giving up more points, but you've got a good amount of space to set it up with. So there's a cool decision to make as to when you do it. And you could avoid them entirely. You don't even have to do any grizzly bear tiles at all. But it gives you another option for some really good usage of space and a way to chuck away dead tiles. Easy include, you know, some of the extra bits kind of work with it, and if you do use the grizzly bear tiles, you now have to use a 5th board, so you have to fill up 5 boards. It's got an exit on it, there's restrictions on where you can place it, no big deal, nobody's really fallen foul of that yet, but you know, it just means that it's now 5 tiles. That, however, is a slight negative, because when you do have 5 tiles, the game goes on a bit long. You know, this was a very quick game to teach, gateway level, no problem. When you then have to build a 5th tile, it doesn't matter if you're using grizzly bear tiles, the game will go on longer than its original 30 to 45 minute time. Games of this can now go on past an hour, and sometimes even longer than that, and that's a little bit too long for my liking. You know, it means that if I'm going to throw in those extra elements, I'm only doing it with people who know Baron Park. I'm not teaching them to new players off the bat, I would just pull out the base set. The second module it adds, the main module, is monorails. Yeah, okay, you knew that joke was coming. But with monorails, this is a great way to use green tiles. As you place a green tile on the board, you can place this cardboard pillar on top, and as you build more green tiles that are at least 2 spaces away, well, 2 blank spaces away, and then the other pillar, you put more pillars on and you connect them with monorail tiles that are just worth points. It looks cool, it gives the map a kind of 3D element, but it's harder to maximize the points in that than you might think, because you can't create loops and you can't create full straight lines. So you basically have to do this constant 90-degree S-bend across your entire map to get the most points out of monorails. It's another path to victory. It requires some planning. You know, this is definitely one for expert planners trying to get the monorails to work, because you obviously have to have the green tiles in the right spot whilst not screwing up the rest of your board. So it's not easy to work with, but very lucrative if you can get it right. It is a pain to have to assemble a bucket load of those cardboard pillars by these fold out bits of cardboard, assemble them all together, and I guarantee you're not going to want to disassemble them before you put them back in the box. No way. You know, so you're going to have to put them all back in the box fully assembled. Oh dear. It has been done by people on BGG. Okay, I admit it. I've seen pictures, but they had to work their Tetris skills to the max to fit it all in the base box. And even if you can get it all back in the box, it will just make takedown take forever. Honestly, I implore you, don't do it. This does mean, however, you're gonna have to put them in 2 separate boxes, and that is a pain. And shame on you Lookout Games for this. Honestly, I mean, you had one job. You had one job. Let Phil Walker Harding design the modules and make this expansion really cool. You just copy and paste the same artwork from the previous lot, that's easy doing. And then you print out the cardboard. You then had one little bit of innovation you could have put in, one bit of initiative you could have used, and that was to make that box bigger. This is a thin box, but it's not a cheap expansion. I mean, there's a fair amount of content in here, and you could be paying nearly £20 for this expansion with all that cardboard. But this will fit everything in it along with the base set. So I now keep my Baron Park in 2 separate things. And I forget what I put in here. I think I put, yeah, in here I put all the grizzly bear tiles and all the pillars. So basically the expansion content goes in here and the rest goes in the other one. And that's fine. I mean, maybe that was what was intended. And some people can work with that. I mean, that doesn't exactly take up much more space on your shelf, does it, next to your Baron Park game? But would it have killed you to just simply make a bigger box? Honestly, would it have killed you? You could have got a normal sized box, you know, I mean, something like this that I was reviewing on a different video, Old West Impresario. A box this big. You could have made a box this big and then made that the expansion box. Yes, it would have had a ton of empty space with this stuff included, but then we could have fitted all the original stuff in there nice and easy. You could have even made a half decent insert for it because frankly, somebody needs to be sacked for coming up with that stupid 3-prong weird cardboard insert that you tried to put in the base set of Baron Park. You know, would it have hurt? Big air box, empty space, maybe a simple insert. It didn't have to be a fancy insert or wooden insert, just a simple one that divided up all the tiles so you didn't have to bag them all up and get them out and sort them out into 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I mean, would it have killed you to try and think a bit like that? Instead, you now have a second box that you have to store with the game. That's good in the sense that you can separate out the expansion content, but just it's an irritation that shouldn't have existed in the first place. But the expansion itself, gameplay-wise, is great fun. I love including these modules. It does take Baron Park beyond gateway level though, I warn you. I wouldn't teach it to gateway gamers with this stuff included. This is more for gamers who play Baron Park because it's nice and light, but want that little bit of extra meat, then I throw this in without a shadow of a doubt. Very entertaining, and everybody will be making monorail jokes. It's just gonna happen. But bigger box, come on. Honestly. You know, dumb name and dumb sized box, but it does the trick. It gives me what I want from a gameplay perspective, just not much of what I wanted from a logistical point of view, if that makes sense. So, you know, in fact, I didn't give a mark for Seasons of Inish, I just realised. So, Seasons of Inish, I would give, let's see, I mean, you've seen the happy face. I mean, I would give it an 8 overall. It's a solid expansion for Season of Inish. This Baron Park one, I'd give this a solid 8 as well, actually. You know, it's gameplay-wise solid. But just having to have a second box and the fact that it's no longer a gateway game, which is a bit of a detriment because one of the best things about Baron Park is that it was a gateway game for polyomino styles, it does hinder it slightly. But like I say, solid expansion, definitely worth picking up if you are a fan of Baron Park. Whew! So yeah, lots of games there, lots of expansions. You know, expansions to games I like are always welcome, but, you know, expansions are hit and miss as to whether they do enough to beef up the game, or maybe add a little bit too much, you know, or don't get something right. But hopefully those have given you some indication of which ones you quite fancy. You know, what are your opinions on them? Do you agree with me or disagree? Let me know in the comments. You guys have been pretty talkative as of late, which I love. Love the interaction with you guys. So I'm going to sign off and get on with editing the last couple of my top 100 videos. Whether they're out by the time this comes out is another thing, but you know, timing is kind of all over the place when it comes to my recording sessions. So that's it for me. I'll see you on the next Broken Meeple Anthology review. And remember, regardless if your monorail has crashed onto a pen of hungry bear... that's dark. That's dark even for me. Never mind. It's only a game. Take care, and I'll see you next time.